Amigos, welcome to Más Leaders. I'm so excited to be here with Mirdalis Herrera Tweeten. I can't wait for you to meet her. Mirdalis is not only an amazing executive professional mama, she's also a friend. So I'm very, very honored to have her here today. So Mirdalis, bienvenida a Más Leaders.
Gracias, amiga.
Qué lindo tenerte. Mirdalis, we're so excited to get to know you. So tell us about you. Who are you?
Well, thank you so much for having me, amiga. I know that this has been a long time coming for us to just, spend un minutico together and getting to get all these stories out there. I just want to say how grateful I am that you're actually taking the time to do this for not just me, for all the, Latinas and the leaders out there. Mirdalis, I was born and raised in Cuba. I came to the United States when I was a kid, really. Since then, I decided to just dive into executive leadership. I started leading at a very young age. I'm a veteran. I served in the military for 4.5 years. And that's where I met my now husband. And we have four beautiful babies together. Not babies anymore. The oldest is 12. So, who am I? I am a natural born fighter. I am a professional. I am a singer. I love art and cultivating and creating. But most importantly, I am someone who shows up for our community, for our people, and really try to be a positive and a strong role model for the next generation. So in everything I do, I really keep that in mind because they're watching us.
Absolutely. Mirdalis, what's really interesting to me is you're a veteran, you're an executive, and you're a mom. All
Yeah.
three of those things happen in your life daily. Tell us about what is that like?
Who do I recently I was talking to someone, I was like, it's like drinking from a fire hose while flying the plane that you're building. And they're like, you just mixed all of the, different ways together. And I said, that's literally my life. When you try to quote unquote have it all, you're going to have it all and spin it all. So, it comes with, a whole lot of organization, but also a whole lot of compromises. And knowing that, as a veteran, I carry the discipline. So obviously that helps me juggle my day to day. But also, if I have a work event, then my husband is going to have to be mom and dad during that time. And, when I'm present with my kids, then work is off. And so it's a juggling act in which, you sacrifice your time and your energy for sure and your hours of sleep. I don't remember sleep, but it's also very rewarding when I look at my kids and they see, mom is doing the thing and she does it every day and she still shows up for us and makes us our lunch from scratch in the morning. It brings me joy to show them that, it is doable, but also to teach them the areas that they should sacrifice and the areas that they shouldn't. Because I feel like they keep telling us, run, 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 do it all. We can do it. I'm a woman, hear me roar. And yes, I'm a woman, hear me roar. But also don't feel like you have to sacrifice everything to be to the level that we're at. Really stay true to yourself.
I love that. When you think of your childhood, so you said you're from Cuba, right? When you think of your childhood, you think of your leadership, you think of your professional life now. What parts of your childhood shaped some of your leadership skills, style, all the things?
I grew up in a matriarchal household. My abuela was like the law of the land, right?
Yeah.
It was a thing. That woman, when she spoke, you just stayed quiet and you said, "Si, señora," and then you carry it on. So I think of her. I think about shadowing her time because my grandmother was a veteran from Cuba. And so I think about shadowing her time with her own veteran friends and how that shaped then my drive to want to serve later on. But honestly, I also think of my mom. I feel like we as Latinas, we spend a lot of time with our grandmothers and that shapes us, and that we sometimes forget that that mom is the incoming abuela, right? And so seeing my mom with my kids has made me realize how much of her I carry with me. Seeing her juggle it all, getting her PhD while also working full
Wow.
time, while taking care of my brother and me, while showing up for my grandmother and my great grandmother, and just her devotion to service.
Wow.
I think about going to her work at it's called the National Association of Artists and Musicians of Cuba. And I think about going there and just seeing the respect that everybody had for her, and how, as a child, I couldn't possibly understand the value and the weight that that carried. But now I look back and see, all the nights that she probably had to sacrifice too. And so I think about the women in my life who really shaped me, gave me a very strong voice and a decisive voice of that, but also honoring the sacrifices that I'm sure they had to make too.
Sure. Miralis, at what point in your life did you realize that your story mattered?
I was doing a show in Minnesota. We had a show at the Ordway, and there was a little girl who came up to me, and she was 12, which is happens to be the age that I was when I first got here. And just seeing her light up by just meeting me. I was also very active in immigration law operations for a firm. So telling her, like, here I am, like, this is who I am, this is who you can be too, like, don't be limited to the Hollywood stereotypes, sweetheart. She shared her own story with me, and I said, I fully see you. And here's why, because I can relate to X, Y, and Z as part of your story. That's when I realized, just seeing her reaction and her desire to know more things, because models. But when I saw that little girl really reflect on, oh, you mean to tell me I can work in law and I can, stand up here and be a singer and then get off that stage and then put on a suit and go help someone become a resident?
Wow.
Yes, you can, honey. Let's do it. And so, yeah, I think that was just seeing children reflect themselves onto me. I think that really shaped me wanting to tell more of my story.
Yeah. So, as
Mhm.
you think of one of the hardest moments of your
Mm.
childhood and how that shaped you, can you share one of the hardest moments that perhaps shaped who you are today?
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is October 10th, 2007. I remember it to the day. October 9th, I had a conversation with my grandmother, and she was in Cuba. We came here in 2003, so I hadn't seen her for, 4 years. And we were planning, I was a senior in high school, we were planning law school, all the things. And the next day she had a stroke. And that meant seeing everything from afar, because we were here, we couldn't go back, or else we would forfeit, all the time that we had been waiting for our citizenship. And just the weight of that decision that I'm sure my mom carries to this day, of, if we go back and be there with her, we have to start over. And we don't know what it's going to look like. And if we don't, then she might, which she did pass. She passed, and we couldn't be there to say goodbye, to carry her for her funeral. I couldn't see her military rights being given to her. My grandmother was my everything. And so for me to not be able to be there and fight for her after she had her stroke, and then 10 days later she was gone, you always ask yourself the what ifs. So it really shaped who I was the following few years, but it led me to the military. I joined the military because I was thirsting for her. I was
Mhm.
searching for her. And I always tell everybody, "No, I joined because I wanted to serve." And that's true. But I was searching for someone that I no longer had. And with my grandmother, a huge part of myself went with her. It led me to the military, but it also led me to saying, "Here I am." I remember a very specific moment when I was at boot camp and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I was like, "There you are, and you got this." And she would be so proud of the woman you're becoming. And so every single time I think about that time in my life, it is very bittersweet because it's heavy, but it's also the time that led me to kind of release myself and really become the person that I am today. The heavy that you carry in those moments, you have a choice to make. You can either rise or you can stay in it. And I chose to rise, not because of the resilience part, which you and I have talked about my particular issue with
Yeah.
glorifying that word,
Yep.
but because I knew that that's what she would have done.
Mhm.
I knew in that moment that not rising was not an option, because not
Mm.
rising was disrespectful to the memory and the sacrifices that she had made. And so that's who I am today. I will continue to rise because in the hardest moments of my life, I hear her in the back of my head saying, "No, no, 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 I didn't raise no blandengue. Like, you will stand up and you will continue, because that's who I raised."
Wow.
So,
As you're talking about your grandmother, I want to double click on that a little bit. In our
yeah.
culture, how important our family is and our grandmothers, right? And our grandfathers. And I think about the movie Coco a
Oh,
lot because it does have a lot of resemblance to what we represent as a culture. So when you
mhm.
think of family and you think of leadership and you think of you as a Latina woman, what comes to your mind?
I think of heart. I think of us showing up, and the way that we show up for each other, for our community is heart. We want to be that heartbeat for those around us. It's not about, competition. It's not about, any of the stuff that they tell us we need to do. We need to fight for that seat at that table, and we do for other reasons. But when it comes about fighting with each other, is the mentality that we have a commonality of feeling this heaviness in our hearts. And so we have a responsibility to show up for each other and fight with each other to move things forward. I feel like that's the magic and the beauty that the grandparents give us, is that they're showing us what is possible when you pour so much into a child, when you give the parent that space to show the sacrifice, but then you have the gentleness of the grandparent be there too. And so you grow up really having it all. You don't grow up having to make the choice because you see mommy like throwing it all, and then grandma comes and is that safe space for you. I want to be that. I want to be the leader that others measure other leaders against. I want to be that for them. I want to be a heart led person who gives you the space to grow, even if you're not going to stay with me. I want to make sure that I pour everything that I have learned, everything that I have lived into you to make you stronger, to make you more powerful. And so, my goal as a leader is to make sure that I create a space so that I am the strength and everybody around me has the capacity to remain soft, to grow and feel nurtured as they're learning and growing as leaders. And so that is my mission, is to be those for others. And that wouldn't have happened. I don't think I would be that particular leader if it wasn't for my upbringing. One of the things that I love the most about this initiative is the breaking of the narrative. Trillion. You didn't say billion, you didn't say million. And so we deserve to be in spaces where we no longer are looked at like, oh, look, the little poor Latino who, like, pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. We did. We sacrificed a lot to get to where we are, but we're no longer scarce. So what I see coming next is us having more of a voice in the spaces where we can have more decision, we can have more influence, we can actually be the recognition for our own people and not just the only hire and the only voice in the room. I don't want to be the only voice in the room. I want more voices, not just like me, but better than me. Because my story, while powerful and important, is not unique. Yeah, they were fighters and they were warriors and they said enough is enough. And you wanted to hear a loud Latina? Well, now you got one. And so what comes next is, probably some more tough conversations, a whole lot of hard work. But at the end of that, it's a generation that will thrive even more than we did. And that is worth every single sacrifice we need to make.
I love that. To end, I want to ask you a question because we could talk for hours. And
Yes, we could.
I think our stories have a lot of layers and very profound details. But as I end, I always ask my guest, as a consumer, what are you looking for in a brand?
That's powerful. I look for representation. I really do. I think, most recently about Wicked, for example, which I did a quick post on it. And I see Cynthia and how authentic she lives, even through this role that is a fictitious world. And so when I think about any branding, I think about, does that person look and act and feel genuine to who they're representing? Because if it doesn't, it's just another token. It's just another placeholder that should get removed so that authentic people feel it. That is also my goal, is to see where I can help to make sure that representation is not only existing but also authentic to each. I feel like any brand, whether it is for, household or entertainment or whatever you are marketing, you have to make sure that you know your audience and you know what they're searching for and that it's representative of them, because otherwise you're tone deaf. And I feel like, people are noticing now, it's not uncommon to have people call it out now, which is powerful. And so when I think about branding, I think, is it authentic? Is it representative of who I am and what I want to see around my space? Is it trying to teach me something? And if it isn't, then, well, then what do we need to do to make sure that those voices are heard and represented accordingly?
Yeah, that's wonderful. As we end, I'll ask you one last question. For the little 10, 12, 15-year-old girl watching you right now, what do you say to them?
Be yourself. You don't need to be me. You don't need to be Ruth. You can be you. The you that you are is perfect. The you that you are is loved and appreciated and cherished more than you know, because that little person can move mountains if only you have the right people to look up to. I hope that we can be those people. I hope that we can grow you and nurture you and have you feel the love and the care that you deserve. And that if and when you're ready to move that mountain, you'll think on us and just know that we're already so proud of you.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Miralis. This went by
My pleasure.
so fast. And for those that are watching this, I know they're going to want more, but stay tuned for more. Miralis Herrera Tweeten for everyone. A veteran, an executive, a singer, a mom, talk about layers in leadership. And we're here because we believe there's more leaders, más leaders. So thank you, Mirdalis. Nos vemos pronto. For those of
Gracias, mi
you
amor.
that are joining, stay tuned for more and we will connect with you soon. Gracias, Mirdalis. Bye.
Hasta luego.